Okay, Corey Ackley here with Hammers to Performance, trying something new. Basically, I'm going back through some of our old data and trying to make some videos on some of the processes and some of the dyno runs that we did and some comparisons. So what we're going back to now is one that was real popular back in 2016-17 time frame, is we did a comparison between the Lloyd torque tubes, the third gear customs intake, and the S&S. And really what we did is a shootout on the same bike, same day, to compare what was the power difference made between each intake, which really boiled down to runner length and airflow direction. And so what we're going to do is we're going to transition here into the dyno and we're going to have a discussion there. So the test bike we used was a 2002 Victory V92 that had a 100-inch big bore with a Wiseco piston, about 11.2 to 1 compression. The heads did have a 3-angle valve job and they were bead blasted. It used an S&S 495 cam. The cam specs are posted on the graph there, and also the exhaust was RPW Thor 2-1 with inch 7/5/8, inch and 3/4 inch primaries. So what we really saw here was a comparison of runner lengths. And so the Lloyd torque tubes add about 6 or 7 inches of runner length on top of the throttle body. So a stock Victory head from the valve to the top of the throttle body is right around 9 inches or so. And then you talk about the Lloyd torque tube, which what it does is add somewhere around 6 to 7 inches more runner length. And a longer runner length, much like a dual plane intake manifold, will cause more torque. Where you look at the third gear custom does not run any additional runner length, but what it does do is provides additional airflow direction. And so the torque tube helps shape the air down into the runner. And then what you also see is with the S&S, where the air comes in from the sides and has to make a 90-degree turn down through the throttle bodies. So what we see here in the dyno is really not surprising. We see the long runner torque tubes that increase torque everywhere in the RPM range except for a little bit below 3,000, and then also about 5,200 is where the torque tubes cross over. And that's what you would expect from a long runner intake. It produces more torque, and that's what it did. And the S&S was down there in the bottom where airflow was slower and the transition period where it has to make that turn from going vertically and down the throttle bodies makes a difference. Okay, what we're doing now is we're looking at the graph from about 2,000 RPMs, about 3,500 RPMs. And once again, this is just a little bit of zoom in. You see in the lower RPMs, there's a little bit of trading back and forth taking place between the third gear customs and the Lloyd torque tubes. By about 2,900 RPMs, 3,000 RPMs, you start seeing the long runner torque tubes start picking up torque. The third gear customs, which really helps with the airflow direction, sort of hangs there in the middle, and then once again the S&S is sort of lagging in there in the bottom. Again, nothing surprising here. Is what we'd expect from various runner lengths and the impacts it had. Here we're looking at the graph from say 3,500 to about 4,700 or so, and you'll see that the Lloyd torque tubes carries more torque across the range, averaging between 3 and 6 pounds of torque through the mid-range. And again, once again, this is what we expect. We would run a dual plane intake manifold, or if we were running a dual plane versus a single plane. If you're thinking about a car intake, it's really about runner length and the direction of airflow. All right, so now we're going to transition to the upper RPM range, peak power. So what you'll notice here is that as the engine speed increases, it will favor a shorter run intake. And that's where the third gear custom starts making more power in the Lloyds, and that takes place somewhere around 5,300 RPMs. So from 5,300 RPMs to 5,600 RPMs is where the third gear customs makes more power, and we continue this trend if we carried it out to 6,000 RPMs or so. So that's just sort of the trend that a shorter runner intake will make versus a long runner. So it's very similar if we were to compare a dual plane intake to a single plane intake. If we were talking about a Chevy 350, 351, small block Ford, big block, longer intake runners favor low to mid-range power. Shorter intake runners favor top end power, and that's why you see the long runner Lloyd's intake make really meaty power in the mid range, as it shows here in the dynograph. So when it looks at, when one looks at the intake manifold, and the exhaust plays a huge part of this, you really look at the whole package. Where do you want your power? That determines what camshaft you pick. That determines your exhaust. And then also where you want your power will help determine your intake manifold. So those three things are some big factors: camshaft, exhaust, and intake runners. Designs will determine where your engine is going to make power. If you link all those three things together correctly, what you'll have is an engine that makes good power. All right, to go ahead and recap, as I was watching the first part of the video while I was editing, I noticed I misspoke on a couple things, and so I want to clear those things up. So the main difference between the third gear customs intake and the S&S, neither one of those intakes provides any additional runner length. But what they do differently is the third gear customs helps shape the air. That natural bend in that third gear customs intake will shape the air and help the air make the turn down the throttle body. Whereas the S&S intake, the air comes from the side and then makes a 90-degree turn down the throttle body. And so earlier in the video, I misspoke on that. So what I want to do is show you that. Hopefully this was of value to you. And if you enjoyed it, please let me know, and we'll try to do more of these. Thank you.